Hey there, everybody. And you know what? I've got a blackbird just outside of the shed here singing Evensong. I should stop now, but he might come back again, which would be very, very lovely. What? What, this? Well, I would have thought that was obvious. Red for Pentecost? I don't think so. Nothing quite so holy as that here in the shed. No, you see, for better or worse, professional sports are beginning again tomorrow. So it seems there really is a chance that Liverpool will yet finish the season where we belong, on top. And I know that you don't all share my enthusiasm about this, probably to put it mildly, but I mean, have a heart. It's been 30 years, for goodness sake. And anyway, it's me that's here in front of the camera, so deal with it. Anyway, listen, let's rise above these things. We're in the holy shed after all, and truth be known, dear friends, you are all very welcome here in the tiniest parish church on the planet. With the glorious, if purloined strapline, we may not be big, but we're small. That said, we're not so small that we cannot squeeze you in, all of you, from across the land and umpteen other parts of the world to boot. And I should stress that this is a social distancing free zone here in the shed. The only thing that we're spreading here is friendship. So huddle together, folks. You're in very good company. Now, for me and Pat, one of the best bits of this week was discovering a wonderful little uh, a little reservoir. Well, more of a large pond, really. Just a short walk away from where we are. We had no idea it existed. We've been longing to hot foot it down to the coast. Pat loves the sea. But so far, we've resisted. So it's lovely to find even a wee dram of water so close at hand, complete with several pairs of coots and mallards and loads of swallows swooping down for a drink and for the odd fly or 10 while they're at it. To kind of drive through for fly burgers and coke for swallows. But then there was this lone gull who I just managed to snap as it was flying away. And I love this picture. It's kind of flappy and broody. Today is Pentecost Sunday, as I'm sure you know. And while I know it's a gull, not a dove, this beautiful image made me think of the divine spirit hovering over the primordial face of the deep in Genesis, out of which creation emerged. And my God, I hope the same spirit is brooding over our own chaos today, here in our little world, and that some kind of good will come out of it all. Actually, when I think of all the Liverpool fans who will now not be around to see their team lift the trophy, the tens of thousands of others across the country whose lives COVID-19 has snatched away, leaving only wretched daily statistics in the news and a few names. And then I don't give a damn about football or much else, to be honest. I just think of all those grieving families, those broken lives, homes and communities. Maybe you're a part of this in a very personal way. So let's pause and light a candle for these dear ones, for our world, and let's say a prayer that foolishness and selfish stupidity at all levels in our society, from the very top of government to the nobodies like me, will be curbed as we do whatever is needed in these coming days to value each and every life, to make things as safe as possible for everyone. So if you've got a candle handy, I invite you to just take a moment of quiet now and light it. Think about all those people, or maybe some particular people that you know firsthand. Now, I've been inviting you to send in questions that you'd like me to comment on in the shed. Could be theological, spiritual, ornithological, personal, social, religious, not religious, whatever. And I've had several already, and I'm going to get stuck into some of those next week. So keep messaging me with whatever questions that you have, or emailing me, whatever. You can find me on Facebook very easily, as you know. But as I say, today is Pentecost. So I want to talk a bit about that. And in a way, these comments are a kind of extension or continuity of what I was saying last week, what we were talking about in the Ascension of Jesus, when I showed you a Dali portrayal of the Ascension to suggest that instead of picturing Jesus floating off on a cloud, an anachronistic product of a three-tier universe, instead of that, we followed Dali in seeing Jesus ascending into the very core of the universe, the ground of being. When I wrote my book, Black Sheep and Prodigals, an antidote to black and white religion, which looks at lots of these issues, I set out with two criteria to guide me, really. First, I wanted to articulate a faith that made sense in a scientific age, a faith which is consonant with the best insights of science and reason. And secondly, I wanted to articulate a faith that is humane, which is based on values like compassion, inclusion and justice, which I have to say I don't always see in the church. So first, a little bit of context. Pentecost, which is a traditional Jewish harvest festival called the Shavuot in Hebrew, has now also become a Christian feast day, because in the New Testament story, this is when the disciples of Jesus were gathered together after the ascension, and a remarkable thing occurred that catapulted the Jesus movement into being. As the story goes, 120 of his followers were gathered in a room in Jerusalem when the rush of a violent wind filled the house, and tongues of fire rested on each of them, and they were filled with the Holy Spirit, it says, and began to speak in other languages. There are so many angles to this story worth commenting on, which is why during 19 years in my previous parish, I pretty much followed a different tack every single year on this day. But today, I'd like to share with you the story through the eyes of a non-religious British painter called Paul Benney, who painted a picture called Speaking in Tongues. 8 feet tall and 12 feet wide, the painting did a tour of various Anglican cathedrals around the country 3 or 4 years ago. Now, I don't know how clearly you can see the picture when it's come down the internet to you. It's quite a dark image anyway, but hopefully you can get the drift of it. Fascinatingly, Benney places the story of Pentecost in the contemporary world and makes it personal by depicting the apostles as real people known to him, friends and others. It's a shame, I think, that they're all men, a point that the artist addresses by saying that he was following the original story where the apostles were all male. Well, in fact, there were 120 disciples, as I say, that were present, including women. Plus, it seems a bit rigid to me to adhere to such a detail when you've already, helpfully I'd say, radically recontextualized the whole thing. That said, I love what he's doing in the painting. Benney says that his objective is to bring people from different ethnicities and different religious backgrounds together as they collectively experience a profound spiritual awakening, a state of grace, he says, that is universally yearned for beyond the boundaries of age, race or religion, and presumably gender too. And there's a lovely added sound dimension to the painting. Benney's friends were recorded speaking about revelatory moments in their lives, births, deaths, betrayals, hopes, and their stories are relayed through holosonic speakers placed around the painting. Holosonic speakers are, those speakers where you've just got like a laser beam of sound going out rather than something that's going broad and wide. The overall effect is of like a low murmuring, a sort of spiritual chatter. Although if you stand in a particular spot, then you can hear the individual voice of that person with clarity. So while the Pentecost event gave birth to the church, this is not the most important bit of the story, Paul Benney says. And it doesn't mean that the church or Christianity now owns what happened. It was a much more universal experience, and everyone gets to be in the picture, regardless of background, culture, or religious tradition. Benney wants the picture to evoke a spiritual experience in the audience, and this is made plain by the resin surface of the painting, which creates a shine designed to reflect the onlooker, to give the effect that you, as you look at it, are actually part of the picture. You're entering into the picture, being part of the experience. Fabulous. Which I reckon is actually, all of this is in keeping with Peter's explanation of what happened at Pentecost. That God's Spirit was poured out on all flesh, he said. All flesh. Not simply on Jews or Christians who didn't actually exist yet, but on all flesh, which we might now say surely includes people of all ethnicities, shades, colours, all gender variations, all creeds and none, all flesh. Now, by far the most striking aspect of Paul Benney's picture, and I've put this slightly different version here, which is actually a photograph of the painting in Chichester Cathedral, I think it is. So the photograph has brightened the picture up, but also you can see the reflection of the window of the church at the left hand side, so you can see the effect of people being reflected in it. And this is the most striking part of the picture is the tongues of fire on people's heads. The Dean of Chichester Cathedral said that at night in the cathedral, when the lights are out, the tongues of fire were all that you could see in the painting. Spooky, hey, but wonderful. And yet, rather than descending on the heads of the apostles, coming down from heaven up there, the artist sees the tongues of fire as emanations from the heads of the figures. He says that they represent an animation of the spirit or soul, and he finds echoes of this imagery in many different religions, for example, in the sacred art of ancient Greece, Judaism, and Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, where the divine emanates from within the person without the person necessarily knowing what is happening. I've always loved the Quaker assertion that there is that of God in everyone, the inner light they speak of, the presence of Christ, recognized or unrecognized, named or unnamed. It's not just in one kind of person, the religious people, and absent in the rest. There is that of God in everyone, they say, whether it's seen as that or not. And incidentally, the story in Acts doesn't refer to the fire coming down from heaven. If you read the text, it simply speaks of it resting on each of them. The Trappist monk Thomas Merton relates in one of his books how he stood in the midst of a shopping mall in Louisville, Kentucky, and he experienced an epiphany through which he suddenly saw the sacred beauty of people's hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, he said. The core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could see each other that way all the time, he said. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. Then there would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. It's an amazing thought, isn't it? All of which brings us to the appalling situation in the United States right now. Blackbirds singing away here. the situation that's been brought on by the vicious, horrendous killing of George Floyd, which turns out to be another powerful trigger for outrage at the endemic racism, not just in America, here as well, in other parts of the world, whereby black lives matter less than white lives do. We don't have the full picture as to why black, Asian and minority ethnic people are suffering greater COVID-19 mortalities than their white counterparts in the US, Britain and elsewhere. But we can be sure that long-standing inequalities in health, healthcare, incomes, housing and employment, all of these things play a part, and they absolutely must be addressed if we want to grow up and go forward in our world. Please take the time, if you haven't already, to read a lovely piece by Parker Palmer called I Can't Breathe, which I posted on my Facebook page. Please, let's flood social media with our disgust at what has happened with the death of George Floyd, but also with our disgust with so many policies and social attitudes that basically say that black lives matter less than white. Here's a poem that I came across, which I don't know the source of exactly. It was attributed to Martin Buber, the Jewish philosopher, but I can't quite imagine that it is. But either way, it's very, very beautiful, which encapsulates so much of what I've been trying to get us to think about in the shed tonight. And I've got the words I can put on the screen. Yahweh, Jesus, Allah, God, I do not suppose you are very tied to titles. You seem to revel more in creating and loving than arguing like we do. You are beyond any name, beyond this group or that, beyond ideas or any ability to control you by definitions. You are the utterly free one. You are the eternal I that always allows me to be a thou whenever we meet. You are the speaker. I am the spoken. So love must be your name, which is always beyond words. Beautiful. So we'll just come to that part now where I invite you to take part in a very simple, perhaps in some ways unholy, communion with one another. I've been saying over the weeks how we're sharing with people, religious and non-religious, in all the nations of the world pretty much, a similar experience through this pandemic. And our experience, if it isn't one of suffering and death, it is one of often of fear and anxiety and apprehension. And that's why it's a good thing to just bring ourselves together for a moment here, inviting God's Spirit that enlivened the spirits of those disciples long ago in Jerusalem to come and energize our spirits with new hope and new vision for our world. So if you've got some bread and wine, or whatever, tea and cake, whatever it is, I've still got one of these lovely bottles of Kilhoman here, and I haven't actually tried this one. So this is going to be my communion wine this evening. Just test it just to make sure it's up to it. Delicious. So whether you've got wine or a cup of tea or some orange juice or whatever, maybe a cracker or a piece of cake or whatever, I invite you just to bring those together now, and we're going to say a prayer which I'll invite you to join in with in different places, and then we'll together eat and drink as an act of solidarity, but also, as I was talking about last week, as a statement of l'chaim, to life, beyond all this death and sadness and suffering and sorrow. The human spirit, that fire resting on our heads incites us to look forward, to reimagine our lives and our world, but also to go out there and be a source of help and support to those people who need our help, especially the vulnerable at this time. So I'll say the words in yellow and you say the words in white. The God of love is with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks for the gift of life. We give thanks to you, O God, for your love for the world. You look upon us and still recognize the goodness within. You conceive in us 1,000 possibilities and carry us on into the timeless struggle in bringing to birth the reign of love in the world. We thank you for our brother Jesus, who gave hope to ordinary people like us, crashing through the boundaries that separate us from life and from each other. With those who've gone before us and those who will come after us, with people of every time, place, culture and creed, we unite with all creation in the eternal hymn, saying together, Holy, loving God, mystery of the universe, who cannot ever truly be named, heaven and earth are filled with your glory and your wonder. Save us, we pray, from small minds and mean spirits, and fill us instead with passion for kindness and justice. And so we remember the night before Jesus died, when he took bread and he gave thanks for everything he had. He broke the bread and shared it with his friends, asking them to remember his total surrender to the spirit of life and love and his enduring love for each of them. And so we take this bread and eat it, mindful of the spirit of Jesus at work in our lives, in the ordinary, in the everyday, in the sacrifice of so many precious people in our world today, in our desire to love as generously as he loved. Likewise, knowing his life was to be poured out, Jesus shared a cup of wine with his friends. We drink now, mindful of our bonding with Jesus and with all people through the Spirit at work in our lives. So come, life-giving Spirit of God, brood over these gifts. As they become part of us, may we become part of the great struggle to bring life and love into our world. Renew our minds, refresh our lives, and may no part of us or of the world be lost to your transforming love. Amen. So, dear friends, take these elements that you have in your hands, eat and drink, for these are symbols of God's unconditional love for you and his reimagination for our world. Let's say together my slightly revised version of the Serenity Prayer for this time. Excuse me. We say together, God grant me the serenity to live fully and generously through circumstances I cannot control. Hope to keep on imagining better times for myself and the world. And courage to change what I can, instead of simply leaving it to others. Amen. Let's say this blessing together. The blessing of God, the eternal good will of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God be among us and between us, now and always. And the blessing of God, Creator, Liberator and Sustainer, be with you and remain with you always. Amen. So that's it for this week, and keep on sending in questions and ideas that you have of what you'd like me to comment on, engage with. As I say, you can email to davetomlinson.co.uk, or you can, better still, probably message me on Facebook or whatever, and I'll see what I can do. Lots of people, by far the most popular thing that people have been asking me to talk about is the whole thing of the the atonement, why Jesus died, and how we understand and interpret that in our lives today. So that's certainly one thing that I will address, but there may be many other things. As I say, they don't have to be theological or religious. Just let me know. And God, it's great seeing this shirt as I look into the camera there. Pretty exciting. So I think this week is, I think this time when it's kind of opening up a little bit more and we've got more freedom coming about in the world, I'll put my hand up and say I'm finding that quite scary. And I think lots of people do. It's also exciting, and for some people it just feels like a breath of fresh air. But it is such a crucial time, and so I think it's important that we keep on staying safe, looking after each other, and well, let's see where we are in a week's time. So go well, God bless you, bye.